Hello everyone and welcome back to another stream from Oman Talks NRL SuperCoach, here to preview round 4, trade targets and in general preview the round, go through TLT, top buys, sells, stats, all of that good stuff. Good to see so many of you in the chat already. Let me know if the audio levels are fine, and someone commented on the last one that the audio was a little bit low, so I've pushed the microphone a little bit closer to myself. So hopefully that's all good. Good to see so many of you already in the chat. We can see 70 people in the stream, which is awesome. Get your questions in. Obviously a lot of stuff to cover for this week. I went for a swim earlier today at lunchtime, which was good, although my right ear has been blocked ever since. I have no idea how to fix it. So if you see me go like this, trying to blow my ears out in the stream, that's the reason why, but I should be hopefully minimizing that. Otherwise, hopefully the brain's still ticking enough to talk through everything in enough sufficient detail. But good to see so many of you already. RG down under, getting in early with a question for the legend. Thank you very much. I don't call myself a legend, but I'll take it. Thoughts on a boosting of Plath, Gazeski and Nafahu White for Haas, Tino and Nicholson? Yeah, I like that boost. Just RG down under. Because you call me a legend, I'm going to answer that question from the top. Nichols, I mean, to be fair, Nafahu White can probably stay. He's got a negative break even, but yeah, Haas and Tino, absolutes. 2025 year of the Gibber, says Reese W, one of the best in the community. Do give him a follow as well. I think it's SuperCoach Late Mail on Instagram. He's posting some really good stuff on the socials as well. But yeah, good to see you in the chat, Reese. Adam Quinn says, yo, love you, Aman. Thank you very much. Appreciate the love. Greetings, everyone, from Roger Duckling. Peter Papanicolo. What's up, Aman? Evening, Roger. Evening, Rusty. Big man, Aman, from Emma Alexander. RTS has to go. Absolutely. So we've got the news that he's going to be out for like 8 weeks. So he's a sell. Bo Fermor, is he a good replacement? We'll talk a bit about Bo Fermor for sure. Bring on the stream. Mark Lawless, as always, good to see you here. Jason Yang, your weekly dose of Aman. I actually come to you twice a week. So bi-weekly dose of Aman hopefully is what you're getting. Otherwise, good to see you here, Jason. Sounding good. How are you, Aman? Thank you, Isaac. Good to hear. I'm very good, apart from this right ear issue of mine. Hair looks awesome, SC Warrior. Look, there's only one thing I can guarantee on this channel, whether it's good, maybe it's not good stats, maybe it's not good SuperCoach advice, but the hair is always going to be there to look its very, very best for you all. So don't you worry about that. But thank you for noticing. All right, enough chit chat. Let's get into the usual. So quick update on where I'm at in my own team. It's been a good start to the year. 1168 is what I scored last week. So season rank is like 2,700, which is, I'm very aware that ranks don't matter so much, but it's nice to have such a good rank at this point so early in the year. I think I finished last season like 2,000. I'm already only 600 spots off that, but obviously we know that I could just have one bad week and we could go tumbling downhill. So not pretending at all that I'm set for an amazing finish. It's only the beginning, but it's been a good start, which is nice. And guys, a few people are still messaging me as well. If you do want to join my league, I do have one. The league code is 251620. I'll try to keep it on screen on as many of the slides as I can. I think it is available to join up until, I think, round 12. So yeah, get joining in that. And shout out, I think, to Miguel, who's topping that league currently. I think he's in 25th over rank, which is awesome. But yeah, good start for myself. But we're here to help all of you out there. Quick wrap up of TLT, which, wasn't too surprising. I think we get a lot of the news kind of early in the week, which is good. But a few notable things. So Rabbitohs, Campbell Graham is out with a lower limb injury. Not really sure what that means exactly. Haven't seen much definitive news on him. Alex Johnson is back. Penrith, definitely some TLT watches here with Dane Laurie has been named at fullback. Thomas Jenkins named at centre in place of Casey McLean, who was dropped now to 18th man. So he only is playing his second game this week, but he's 215k, and I think a lot of people are going to be looking at him maybe as a potential cheapie. So we'll talk about him in a little bit more detail later. Tolau has been named at number 7 in replacement of Cleary. He's obviously missing this week. We'll talk for sure about Cleary. NRL Centre here is already asking, could Jenkins be a potential buy as a cheapie? 100%. We will discuss him. But yeah, he's Penrith. I'm very, very interested in terms of what TLT was bringing out. Roosters, Connor Watson's out for a week with the HIA. And Lindsay Collins is back. Keanu Kinney's out this week. Bit of a surprise, I think, to most people with a neck issue. Supposed to be only minor in nature, though, so he could be back as early as next week, if not maybe the week after. that has some implications. If some people were thinking of De Groot, who's his replacement, as maybe a cheapie, he might not be, relevant for that long. So maybe not the best person to downgrade to. Katoni Staggs is back, but fortunately for most of us in Supercoach, it was at the expense of Dean Mariner. Shibasaki stays in centre, so he's going to continue to make some money for us, and he looked really good last week actually as well for the Broncos. For the Dragons, David Klemmer has been named for his first game for them off the bench. Toby Couchman is still starting. He's someone who hasn't changed in price yet. And Hamish Stewart has also been named on the bench. He's a potential downgrade option in front row, or maybe with duels from any underperforming second rowers. But I think with Klemmer coming in, that may potentially impact minutes. For the Storm, I called out that Papy has been named just because he had some minor ankle niggles. But he's named and hopefully should be goal kicking with Nick Mini out for 4 to 6 weeks. Ty Wishart at number 7. For the Raiders, Joe Tarpany returns, which might impact someone like a Trey Mooney, who absolutely killed it last week. Corey Horsburgh back to lock, and Tamale still named on the wing, so good for anyone who jumped on him and who was maybe a little bit concerned with his job security after the Raiders' pretty poor performance last week. Dogs, not much there, 1 to 17. Tom Hazelton is back for the Sharks, otherwise not much happening there. Turbo's back for the Manly Sea Eagles, which we all expected. For the Eels, Sam Riney is out and Sean Russell is in, so that kind of kills him as a potential downgrade option that people might have been looking at. And then final game, Tigers, 2 notable Supercoach ones. Gerard Skelton has been named. Now, they do play the very last game of the round, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to cover for him if he is a late out. The reserves that the Tigers have named doesn't really have that many outside backs or specialist kind of wingers. So Skelton, I am surprised that he was named. Physio was kind of saying that even a minor strain, you rarely see players come back directly the week after. But he's been named. If he's a late out, maybe just try plan for it if you can. Jack Bird could go to centre. Stafford Toa could go to the wing. So that might potentially play out. And then, Tuivasa-Sheck's out for what looks like 8 weeks. So he'll be an easy sell for owners, which myself is included. So that's a bit of a TLT wrap-up. Aman, finally get to catch a live. Congrats on your recent nuptials. Thank you, Silico. I very much appreciate that. Yeah, maybe if you see it every now and then, I'm flaunting it on the stream. But yep, I've got the ring. Got the ball and chain. That fat guy, good to see you back. I haven't seen you so far this season. There you go. First stream you've been to in 2025. Welcome back, mate. There you go. I saw your username. I was like, oh, I remember you just because your username's fantastic. But no, great to see you back in the chat as well. Hair's looking fresh, says Kelvin. So I think I can switch. I think I can turn off the stream now. I think mission's accomplished. You don't need my advice. Just you got a good look at the hair. That's all. Thoughts on trading Reggie the Rabbit in for those base stats? I don't know if pushing over... I don't even know exactly what happened, but yeah, I think pushing over or getting in altercations with 9-year-olds is... I don't think Supercoach award points for that, unfortunately. Rami says, up the gibbers. Yes, indeed. Great WhatsApp chat there. The SC gibberers. So that's quick TLT wrap up. In terms of talking points, obviously there's a lot of talking points. I've put a poll up, which you can still vote on in terms of helping decide the running order. Papy versus Gutherson is the most voted topic at the moment, 48%. So we'll start there. The next one was on cheapies like Jenkins, Hamish Stewart. And then we'll get on to other cash gen options like Tuipolutu, Matty Nicholson, and then a little bit on Cleary as well. So we'll get into all of that. So I'll talk about this table with break-evens and cash gen. I might save it for in more detail for later, talking about cash generation. But still relevant to look at because you do have the likes of Clint Gutherson with a negative 48 break even at the 675k. So he's set to make quite a bit of money. Whereas you might have other guys that you're looking to move off on in fullback like a Reece Walsh, 149 break even and 679k. It's a direct swap in price between the two, but you could make a lot more money out of Gutherson. And despite Reece Walsh having a good draw, your eye test might think, you know what, I'm not looking to hold him long term, just at least until he shows something a little bit differently. Other cash generating options here like Pappenhausen, so he's got a negative 4 break even, so not as significant as Gutherson's, but with the goal kicking that we expect, he's going to be a very popular option and should be making good money. And Storm actually do have a fairly decent draw as well. So let's quickly touch on that topic of the fullbacks, just because that is the number one talking point that I think most people want to see. And I'm just going to quickly, just bear with me for a second. Just going to bring up the SuperCoach website just so I can see exactly where these guys are ranking in terms of the top trade ins and outs. So just give me a second. So yeah, you've got Gutho at number 4 and Papy at number 3. So very, very popular trade-ins for this week. Papy's on like 11,000 trade-ins and Guthoson's at like 8,700 at the time of recording, streaming, which is 8:43. So if you've got any questions about fullbacks, this is the time to get them in. So, I just realized I think you guys might be able to see that on the screen. 1 second. My bad. Just realized that's very annoying. Okay. All right. I think that might have fixed the screen up. Let me know if that's all good for you guys, because I realized just then I had like half of the SuperCoach up and half the SuperCoach website up and half of my slides up. But I think now we've just got the slides up, so we should be sorted there. But yeah, definitely get in your questions about fullbacks here, and this can include even like an Iongi as well, because this is potentially one of my trades that I'm dabbling with this week. Is I really do like the look of both Papy and Gutho. I've currently got Turbo. He won't go for me this week. Pong is on the bye. And then there's Iongi, who actually looked not that bad last week. And he's actually looked okay in his opening 3 rounds. So R2 Rusty is saying, rate your top 3 fullbacks over the next few weeks. We can definitely answer that question. So Keanu Kinney was in this table here, but obviously I'm not going to talk about him now with him being out for this week. So the fullbacks that I've got on screen, Kalen Ponga, Turbo, Drinkwater, Gutho, Reece Walsh, Teddy, and Papy, aside from Keanu Kinney. So very quickly, I can kind of rule out, I think, Drinkwater, just with fairly tough run of Canberra, Penrith, Rabbitohs, and then the bye in round 7. I think Drinkwater is not really someone people will be considering, so I'll rule him out. I won't necessarily rule out Teddy, just because the next 3 are not bad with Titans, Rabbitohs, and the Broncos, but his price is still very expensive at $865K. So I am looking more at the likes of Ponga, Turbo, Walsh, Gutho, and Papy. Those kind of 5, I think, in the gun tier is where I'd be looking at fullback. So the difficult thing with Turbo, one of the questions that I think people might be asking is, do you buy back Turbo this week? Because he's got a great matchup at home against Parramatta on Sunday afternoon. Could be a top captaincy pick. I think Turbo is, if you sold last week, then I think you would, my personal view is that you just stay away now that you've made that decision. You knew that Parramatta was coming up, and the reports were going to be that he was most likely to be coming back this week. After that, he runs into Melbourne Sharks, Dragons, Penrith, and then a bye, then Sharks again. So it is a tough run from round 5. I think if you can just get through this week, maybe just don't watch that particular match, then I think Turbo, just because of tougher draw coming up, I think he wouldn't, it's always tough to not say that Turbo's in your top fullback picks. But I think I wouldn't be going back into reinvesting in Turbo. I think Papy moves, like in the whole Papy versus Gutho debate, Papy for me is, I think, going to come out on top. Now, I don't think this is going to be the Pappenhausen of, maybe say 2020, 2021, where he was like a 95, 100 plus averaging gun. I think those injuries have set him back a little bit, probably in terms of his speed and his acceleration and stuff. But I do like that without Jerome Hughes, maybe him and Munster and Grant will have to take up more of the load. So Papy might get more involved when it comes to those big attacking stats like try assists, line break assists, gets the goal kicking. So last season in non-injury games, Papy averaged 66. And I calculated that Nick Meaney, so he had about, I think, 105 goals from 24 games. So give or take 4 to 4.5 goals per game. If you just give Papy the similar strike rate, which I think they do, that's about another 18 points, 15 to 18 points for Pappenhausen in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So if you give him the 66 plus 15 to 18 points, we're looking at someone who's going to be averaging, based on those numbers, early to mid to maybe even high 80s. And this is in a gun Melbourne team with a pretty good draw of Dragons. Manly away is a little bit difficult, but then you've got Warriors, Dolphins, Rabbitohs, Canberra, Tigers, Sharks. Apart from the Sharks in round 11, there's no matchups in there that I'm really, really fearing for Pappenhausen. And I think it's just one of those ones where the price is good, 616K, negative break even, a little bit cheaper than Gutho. And I just think it's that goal kicking that really kind of, sets him up. Gutho is still probably, I'd say Gutho would be third of those top 3. In the straight Papy Gutho debate, I'm leaning slightly Papy, and it's mainly goal kicking. Like Gutho looks super involved, and he's set to make a lot of money. You can see in the graph below me, this is the first 3 round averages for these fullbacks in terms of their base, evasive numbers, creative, and scoring. So there's not a lot to read into these numbers, given that it's such a small sample size. Obviously, with Gutho, he really sticks out because he's gotten 2 massive 100-plus scores in his first 2 weeks. So his base and his evasive, his base is pretty much what it's been historically, which is around that mid-20s. Good evasive numbers because he's gotten some line breaks, but it's really the creative numbers of the try assists and line break assists. That's where he's getting all of these points, and it's pretty much feeding Christian Tuipolutu. If you look at Pappenhausen, he's got a pretty healthy scoring average of 30 because he's scored a fair few tries already. But even if you scale that back, because Pappenhausen at the moment's got like a 98. I think he's got a 98 average. Apologies. I think that the graphic on screen might be not quite updated. I think that was prior to his week before. So just give me a second. I believe Papy's average is about 98, not 131. That was his round 1 score. Yeah, he's sitting on about a 98 average. So even if I scale back his scoring average by 15, then I still think he's going to be getting around that 83 average. So for me, most signs are pointing towards an 83 average for Paps and a good run. So that's why I think for me, like, he seems like, for the price, very good value and also very good option. Gutho probably would be third, but just a bit behind Papy for me. I still think Turbo for me would be number 2. Really awesome matchup this week. And then while the run does get tougher, we know that Turbo still is, like, I think just when it comes to when he's on his game, one of the best in SuperCoach. So that means I probably do put someone like a Ponga in 4th or 5th, even behind those 3. So this probably does lend into some people thinking, is Ponga maybe a sell? So Sean Manning here is asking, is Ponga a sell or a hold? Tough draw coming up for him post-bye. So you can see obviously that Knights have the bye this week. Then after that, Ponga runs into the Bulldogs. West Tigers at home. Pre-season, we would have thought that would have been a very good matchup, but West Tigers are looking far better than I think people may have expected, even defensively looking very good. Then he runs into the Sharks. Then it's Warriors away, Rabbitohs away, Titans, Parramatta. So really from round 8 is when I think the draw looks a little bit better for KP, and then you probably do want to jump back on him. But I can understand that argument of people looking to sell Ponga to maybe one of Gutho or Papy. You free up, north of 100k, 170k in this case of getting Pappenhausen. Excuse me. About 170k getting to Pappenhausen. And if that's your ticket to then say, I want to go get Payne Haas from one of my kind of mid-range second rowers, or maybe a underperforming front rower, or if it's what it lets me get maybe Kobe Hetherington to a Tino. You start thinking about it in combinations, right? Like KP and Kobe Hetherington, or Papy and Tino. I would 100% say Papy and Tino is the better combo. And what I think plays into this nicely as well is Iongi. I'm going to assume that a lot of people are on that 2 fullback gun structure plus Iongi. Like, Iongi's numbers are actually pretty decent so far this season. He's basing 31 on average so far. And I think he had 37 in base last year. So he's actually basing more than Teddy and the same as Keanu Kinney, who we traditionally look at as higher base work rate fullbacks. So underlying base is good. The shortcoming is that with the Eels' poor form, he's just not getting those massive attacking stats. But he's been solid to start the year with a 50 average. I haven't got it up on screen here, but if you use NRL SuperCoach Stats price change calculator, if I just give Iongi his 50 average, which I think is very possible because if you look at their draw until round 8, Manly, Dragons, Canberra, West Tigers, it's not a terrible run. And if he goes and averages 50, by the time he finishes that West Tigers game, he's projected to make an extra 117k, and he'd be sitting on about 413k. So there's still money to be made in Iongi, and you can maybe fade Ponga until round 8. That could actually be almost a perfect switch back. You could have Iongi to round 8, and then when he's on the bye, you can switch straight back to KP once he runs into the Warriors and Rabbitohs. Now, there's nothing to stop KP from still scoring big in those tougher games because he looked really good apart from last week. So, bit of risk still with fading KP. It's not even like his break-even is super high as well. His break-even 76. So, I don't think it's necessarily a case of KP leaking a lot of cash. But if you're going to these money generators in Gutho or Papy, you can decide to flick them maybe even back to a KP. Or you make enough money from other cheapies like Tom Starling, Jesse Arthurs, etc. That lets you go from Iongi back to KP. So I say all of that in terms of it's not necessary to sell KP. Like, I'm not sitting here saying you have to sell him. He's a must sell. But I think, like, put it this way. If I'd rather sell Ponga or Cleary this week, I'd much rather sell KP than Cleary. Just because of the draw whereas Cleary comes back to a much better run when he's back. And the difference is at halfback, you don't have as many quality replacements. Fullback though, like I'm looking at it here, we rattled off like 3 or 4 good gun fullbacks. Like I'm not even still looking at I'm not even factoring like a Teddy or like a Drinkwater, for example. They can on their day still put out good scores. On Reece Walsh, so there's a couple of questions here about Reece Walsh. So we're looking at Adam Quinn saying, please God, tell me to sell Walsh. Now, traditionally, I think maybe when I was podcasting or making content earlier, I was very draw fixated. I would always say, no, the draw is good, therefore you want to hold these players. Dolphins, West Tigers, Roosters, all 3 are going to be at Suncorp. Dolphins have conceded some big points to opposing fullbacks as well, so there is a bit of a risk in that. But I do think I'm trying to lean more into eye test, and with 149 break even, with good options in Gutho and Papy, who I'd rank above Reece Walsh, just purely from eye test and point scoring potential at the moment, I think Walsh is fine to sell. Doesn't feel great because he's got these good games coming up, but if you want to avoid that massive cash drop, and I understand that cash generation is very important at this time of year, selling Walsh to one of those 2 in Gutho or Papy, I think is completely fine. Again, not must sell, but I can understand that move. If it becomes very financially difficult for you to upgrade Iongi to one of those 2, you might just say, look, I'm just going to cut ties with Reece Walsh. I get it. And similar thing as well with KP, selling KP to one of Papy or Gutho. So that's some of my thoughts, I think, on the fullbacks. Hopefully that addressed a lot of your questions. The reason I've given it a lot of thought as well is that I'm in a similar position of having Turbo, Ponga and Iongi, which I think is probably the most popular fullback combo coming into the season. To be honest, up until this afternoon, I wasn't really thinking about selling Ponga. I was actually looking at ways to upgrade Iongi. But I was just looking at the draw a little bit and I thought, well, Iongi's not necessarily a must sell. He's actually looking okay. Could I maybe fade Ponga for a little bit? The other thing I told myself, but if KP went out last week and scored 120, would we be considering selling him? Probably not. I think we'd just say, look, KP's a gun, you want to keep him. But when he goes and scores 45, and a fortunate one at that because he got a very late try assist, those big scores that he got earlier will start dropping out of his 3-round rolling average. He may lose a little bit of money. So that's the other thing to factor, I guess, with KP. Just going to pull out some questions from the chat or comments as well on the fullbacks. So Jared S says, I'm going Ponga to Gutho with a plan to get Ponga back for Iongi next week. Early season cash gen is the plan, which I can totally understand in terms of generating cash. Obviously, it burns a lot of trades, but if you're always going to flick Iongi out, you're only, I guess, using that 1 extra trade to get back to KP rather than 2. So I don't think that's necessarily a massive problem. Peter is saying almost everything goes through Gutho, with Papy and the Storm having players like Munster, Grant, etc. And considering his potential for the ankle injury in regards to Pappenhausen, he's saying Gutho for the win. And it's a tough one because, both of them obviously have very good credentials to be bought this week. I just think I still feel like without Hughes and just even what I've been seeing, Grant at the moment just doesn't seem like famous last words. He just doesn't seem like the one, I think, pulling the strings, getting those big attacking stats for the Storm. It's kind of the halves and Papy. And we saw that Tyron Wishart is a bit of a go-getter. He'll try to go get his own attacking stats. We saw that last year. I feel like that dynamic might not change, even with Jerome Hughes out. I still feel like it will be centered around Papy sweeping out the back and then Munster. And I think with Papy, you want to look at the teams he's coming up against. Do they have weak edges? I think Dragons, yes, they leaked 25 points to the Rabbitohs. Manly, look, at home, it's very difficult, but on their day, they can still leak points. Warriors' edges, I don't think are very strong. Dolphins' edges are not strong. Rabbitohs' edges currently aren't strong. By then, they might be a bit different because they might have the troll back, but still, I think Rabbitohs aren't necessarily a defensive powerhouse. So, on paper, matchups are really good. I mean, we didn't even speak about Guthoson's draw, but he's got Melbourne this week, which is obviously tough. But then he's got Parramatta and the Titans. I completely get people wanting to get Gutho, and I love getting into the narrative of like Gutho versus his old team Parramatta. He would want to put on a massive performance. So put it this way, if you can try to get both of them this week, awesome. I think they're both really good options. I myself slightly lean, I think, towards Pappenhausen. Alrighty, what's the next topic? I ended the poll, so I can't actually see what it was. It was on cheapies and a bit of cash generation. So Matt Sherwood saying, I'm going Ponga to Gutho, but that allows me to go Metcalf to Jaden Campbell. So again, that's when those kind of trades and the money it frees up lets you really bolster up in your other positions. Then I can fully understand, a trade out of say like a KP, obviously with the view that you need to try get back up to KP at some point in the next few weeks. On cheapies and cash generation, because I'm seeing quite a few, there was a few questions about that at the beginning of the stream, and that was the second most popular topic. So let's get into that. So R2 Rusty saying, how many cheapies is too many cheapies? Very good question. Very tough to answer. I think you just need to look at every cheapie on a case by case basis. Like, you don't need to go out and get in every single guy who's got a big negative break even, because ultimately you're just going to make a lot of cash, but then you need to burn a lot of trades to get these guys back out again. And ideally you balance cash gen with points. Last week it really paid off well for me, where I got in Arthurs and Starling because I did want to get cash gen, but we thought the potential for points would be there. They both scored okay, 53-61. My third trade could have been to get Tamale, who had a really big negative break even, but Payne Haas was just sitting there, and I thought, this guy is just a freak and he scares the living daylights out of me. I need to get him in. And also I calculated the swing of Hopgood, his price drop versus Haas's price increase. That in effect generated cash, but got me points as well. So those are the perfect kind of trades, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So I think it's about balancing getting points in cash gen. I think for me, like I look at Gutho and Tuipolutu, I think they're good trade-ins because they've got a really good run up past this Melbourne game and they could make a lot of money. Thomas Jenkins, look, not a must trade-in, but if he holds his position again next week, then you might think, okay, this is a Penrith Panthers backline player for 215k, insane value and also good scoring potential. Good cheapie, but also good for points. Therefore, I think that's someone I would be looking to get. Vice versa, you might look at some guys on the list here and think like, let's say have a look here, like maybe an Isaiah Katoa. A lot of people probably are maybe making trades at halfback, but when you've got not many replacements, you've got Nico, Cleary, Adam Reynolds is killing it. Cherry Evans is actually doing very well himself. Obviously very, very much in the news over the last day or two. You don't have to bring in Isaiah Katoa, even though he's got a negative 15 break even and could make some good money, because again, I look at him and say, I don't necessarily need to chase that cheapie. I've got plenty of other good cheapies in my center wing and whatnot. So look, no hard and fast rule, but my view is always, if I feel like I can downgrade to these guys to free up money, and if I think that my view is always, if I downgrade to this person and maybe absent of like having a negative 180 break even or something where they're going to automatically make almost 100, 150k, if I downgrade to this player and they stay in my team for the rest of the season, is it going to be the worst thing in the world? If I think no, then I think it's a cheapie I'm happy to go and chase, because they may have good job security or they may have potential for points or something like that. Anyway, on specific cheapies for this week. So a couple of questions I can see here. Fangnado is asking thoughts on Hamish Stewart and his job security. I think the job security with him is fine because Ryan Couchman got a very long-term injury, and I think that Dragons bench is more or less what it's going to be moving forward now that Clemmer is back in the team. So Stewart played about 41 and I think 33 minutes in his first two games for 42, 44 points. So he's decent PPM, looks like he's got a decent work rate about him. Like that bench I'm looking at here of Jacob Little, David Clemmer, Hamish Stewart, and then Dylan Egan. Look, apart from maybe Dylan Egan, maybe like a Faitala Mariner comes back into that team at some point, who knows? I think Stewart's minutes, I'd guess, would be around that kind of 30-minute mark. And if he can punch out kind of 40 to 45 for you, look, he could be a slow burn to make 100k, but I don't mind him as a bit of a downgrade either. I've actually looked at a couple of trade scenarios where I've traded down to him via duels to free up money. This is when I was tinkering with how to maybe get a Gutherson or a Pappenhausen and keep Ponga and keep Turbo. So I do like Stewart as a downgrade. I think his 42, 44 points that he's got in the first two rounds, look, maybe they scale back slightly to high 30s because his minutes might go down a bit, but I feel like that's about where he will sit. And look, if he drops out of the team, he's a bottom dollar front row forward. If you've got Payne Haas, Terrell May and Corey Horsburgh already there, or like a Tino, your front row is already probably well set. You can probably afford to carry a bottom dollar front rower. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to bring him in as a downgrade option. So I look at him as a good downgrade. Again, similar to what I was just saying, good downgrade who could make some cash. If he just sits there, not the worst thing in the world, because you've probably got very good front row cover up until Origin, and then maybe you have to reassess at that point in time. Other cheapies that people are looking at, so Thomas Jenkins. So I've actually got a slide dedicated to him, so let's quickly jump to that one. So I'm very interested in Jenkins, and my conservative self would say wait a week, because you want to find out what happens next week in terms of the TLT news for Penrith. So Dylan Edwards should be coming back in round 5. That's what NRL.com's got him currently listed at in their casualty ward. So you could see Dane Laurie then move back to the 14 jersey, and Jenkins stays in the centres. Maybe Dane Laurie goes to the wing and Alamotti goes back to the centres. My gut thinks that is Jenkins' jersey to lose now. Listen to a couple of other content creators as well. They apparently he's played left centre in New South Wales Cup and looked very good there. So he's someone who I think could offer that really good potential of being close to bottom dollar in a gun Penrith team with a very big negative break even and a very good draw coming up as well. There is a job security concern there with Casey McLean. So Casey McLean just got dropped this week. Who's to say that if Jenkins has a bad performance that maybe Casey McLean just gets back into that team? That's the concern. So I like Jenkins. My gut feel is that he'll stay there. But if you really don't want to run that risk, then the safe option is just to wait for next week, because if Dylan Edwards is back next week, then you can fully understand the picture of what will happen with Dane Laurie. Like, does Dane Laurie go to 14 and then Blaze Talangi go out of the squad altogether again because Talangi's been named at 14? Or do you see Dane Laurie at wing, Alamotti at centre, and Jenkins out of the team? That potentially could happen. So my gut feel is that I think he'll stay, but there is some job security risk. You just need to be aware of that. I think if you are looking at maybe a 1 week early trade to him, but I do like him. I looked at some of his previous scores in other seasons. Not a huge sample size, but he had a period in 2023 where he did average about 72 points across maybe 4 or 5 games, and he had like 132 in his score. So it seems like when he's gotten the opportunity, he is able to pull together some good SuperCoach scores. Obviously had a good week last week against Melbourne playing at fullback. So I like him. Just obviously there might be some job security risks with him. On other cheapies and cash generators, so we've spoken about Stewart and we've spoken about Jenkins. There was a question earlier I just want to have a quick look at, which was about Jamie Humphreys. So I can't find the exact question, apologies, but it was more or less asking, is it too late for Humphreys? I do feel like now that he's 390k with a negative break even, maybe the ship sailed a little bit. You've missed out on about an 85k in price increase already. And Latrell, if he's back next week, will take that goal kicking from him. The draw is a little bit tough as well. Does feel a situation where when he's close to 400k now, I think I'd probably just say I'd probably just let him go. I think now maybe if you're still sitting there with a Tom Duffy, then maybe yes, I understand if you want to still get up to Humphreys. But my broad suggestion I think is you've kind of probably missed the boat, I guess, now that he's made that first price increase. Will Jenkins' position change affect his potential upside for points? I do think that playing at centre, you're less likely to get those bigger scores compared to being a fullback. You got 3 try assists, I want to say last week, 2 or 3. You're much more likely to get those playing at fullback than you are at centre. So, I think his points potential will go a little bit down if he's playing at centre. But again, he's 215k playing for Penrith. I still think he's a very good potential option. Other ones to watch who don't necessarily have big negative break-evens, but maybe are cheapy downgrades in centre. You've got Stafford Toa. He's 288k. He's got a negative break-even of 17, so could be a nice little option, and should have good job security on that jersey. You've also got Robert Derby from the Cowboys. So he's played, I think he's only played 1 or 2 games so far. He's played the 1 game so far. Look, he only scored 34 points. He's 214k. Again, maybe you can downgrade to him, but probably one I'd be doing next week. But look, honestly, for similar price, I'd almost take the chance on Jenkins above Derby. Or Derby, however you pronounce it. Just much better team to play for. Cowboys have got that bye coming up very soon as well. Let me know if you guys have any other considerations on cheapies or downgrade options, or guys with maybe big negative break-evens. I think the next one is probably Matty Nicholson. He is the most traded in player, I believe, this round. So let's quickly jump to him. Where is he? Matty Nicholson, -42 break even. Most traded in player this week. Good underlying work rate. So his opening game, he had a base stats of 34 in 66 minutes. Played the full 80 last week. No attacking stats, but scored 49. So he scored 50 points in base. 3 points was for like a held up in goal, and then a couple of negative stats. Tuipolutu, we'll talk about Tuipolutu after we talk about Matty Nicholson. So with Nicholson, I think he's a good purchase this week. I mean, he's the most traded in player. Maybe there's some slight minutes risk once Hosking comes back into that team, but I think he showed enough that maybe warrants him staying in that starting jersey, even if Hosking comes back, because we did actually see Hosking play some middle in periods of the last game before he got injured. What I've done for Nicholson is I've plugged in for him a 50 average, which I thought based on his base stats of 50 from last week. Obviously, some games will be a little bit down, but if you add in some attacking stats, which I do think can happen, because if you actually look at the Raiders run, it's a pretty nice draw. Cowboys this week away, then it's the Sharks, but after that it's Parramatta, Titans, Dolphins. I think four of the next 5 are actually quite good matchups on paper. So he could get some attacking stats and really could make some good cash for us. I just gave him a 50 average just to keep things safe or keep things conservative. Giving him a 50 average up until New Zealand in round 12, if you hold him for that long, he'd be making 130k. So he would be a bit of a slow burn, but he should be making that. My benchmark is normally around about 100k. Ideally, you want to be making at least 100k from these kind of guys that you're downgrading to, or if you're purchasing guys with negative break even, I'd wager that he's probably going to average slightly above 50, given that he's got that ability to get good attacking stats. And obviously, you don't need to hold him all the way until round 12. You can hold him until maybe say round 9. Gets a little bit tougher the draw at that point. But even round 9, if you did that, he'd be making 120k for you. So I think the cash generation seems to be good enough, and I think he's probably got enough of a hand on that jersey with Hosking being out until say round 9. So I do really like Nicholson as a trade-in. I've got some sell candidates up there like Jack Gazewski. I think he's probably going to start losing money, honestly, because he scored 35 points with a try last week. He's got a 34 break even, and he's 267k. I think you can definitely make that change. Kobe Hetherington's another one who I own. He's been a bit of a plodder, I think, with Payne Haas and Carrigan getting good minutes in the middle. Hetherington's upside is just absolutely capped. So he's got a 36 break even. Not an urgent sell, but you can do a straight swap to Matty Nicholson and probably get better scoring potential from Nicholson and also make more money out of it as well. Aman, NRL Physio has just said that Papy is looking doubtful for this weekend. Oh boy. All right. Let's just interrupt the Matty Nicholson rant. Let me just quickly check that. Hopefully he's tweeted. Where is he? Has he tweeted? NRL Physio, my man, where are you? Going to miss you at Magic Round this year, unfortunately. Can you please send a link in the chat, Adam, about that? Just so, or if you say that on Instagram, I'm not sure. If you can just post a link to that, that'd be awesome, because obviously that will change a lot of my views on, the Papy versus Gutho debate. But I've already said that section anyway. There's a question here which was Tino or Nicholson if you had to get one. Look, we didn't talk about Tino earlier in the break-even section. Tino does have a negative break-even. He's got a -4 break-even. Obviously not as big as Nicholson. But look, Tino, there is absolutely no job security concerns. He is a gun. He's such good value at 530k. He's dual. I definitely think if you can get Tino, I think you would fade Nicholson and you just get Tino. And I think you just lock him in for literally the rest of the season, or at least until Origin. Okay, saying it's in his private channel. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this is on his, it's actually free for anyone to join. So it's not like it's a secret chat or anything like that. So what Physio has said is, I've heard Paps ran with the rehab coach on Monday rather than full training with the others. Storm had posted an injury update video where they mentioned players who carried injury at the back end of round 3 game. Something to the effect of some looking good, some looking doubtful for round 4, although it doesn't specify who exactly. So look, that could be Papy, and this is one thing we didn't talk about in that section, but Papy does have, he's been riddled with injuries in the last few years, and there's always that concern with him. look, I think if there's any doubt with Papy going into this week, then that obviously makes your decision very easy. I would just go Gutho instead. If fully cleared and fit and available, I'll go Papy. But look, based on that news, definitely nothing definitive, but you definitely need to just keep an eye out for that. Melbourne play, when do Melbourne play in the round? I mean, luckily Gutho and Papy play in the same game so that you can just pivot at the same time if Papy's a late scratching. They play Saturday 3 o'clock. It's not too late of a game. You should be able to hopefully plan around that. You know, Eels, for example, play afterwards if you're selling Iongi, so that works for you. And Ponga is on the bye, so he actually doesn't lock out until the beginning of the very last game. So I think you should be in a position to be flexible with your plans. But yeah, obviously you just definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, on that Nicholson-Tino question, for sure, I would be prioritizing Tino. But I do really like Matty Nicholson as a trade-in. I've dabbled with some trade plans for him this week. I think the cash gen is good. And I do have a Kobe Hetherington who I think I could just easily move off and get a guy who I'm much more confident in playing and also getting some money out of. Other questions, Tuipolutu. Let's get on to Tuipolutu, since we kind of referenced Gutho just then. So Flarbets is asking Tuipolutu over Gutho. So my ideal trade scenarios before TLT and before we got the Gerald Skelton news, I was actually able to afford something like RTS, Skelton, and Iongi to Papy, Gutho, and someone like Stafford Toa. And I was like, almost as perfect, because I don't think there's any fantastic Melbourne centres apart from maybe like that you can pick up in Supercoach, maybe apart from a Jack Howarth. Whereas I always prefer wingers in Supercoach, and Tuipolutu playing on the wing is great because he's scored a bucket load of tries already this year. And then I get Papy. So I thought, sweet, I've got at least something from the Dragons and Papy. Whereas it was harder to do Storm Centre and then Gutho. I can understand getting Tuipolutu instead of Gutho just based on that reasoning, just as a bit of a hedge, because most of their attack is going down the left-hand side, albeit questionable try celebrations. But Tuipolutu has got a very big negative break-even of negative 54. I looked quickly at last year's numbers and then also what he posted in the first 2 rounds of this year. Nothing really has changed apart from that they're favouring his edge so much because his base stats are actually equal. So his base average last year was 28, and in the opening two games, he's gone 29 and 28. So there hasn't been like a noticeable change in work rate or tackle. Maybe tackle busting may have gone up a little bit, but it's really the scoring and line breaks. That's why you can see on the screen here, his scoring numbers and then his evasive numbers are so high. It's from scoring tries and line breaks. Melbourne game is tough, but then you do run into Parramatta, Titans, and then Manly. So it's a nice couple of games coming up after Melbourne. Look, I don't mind Tuipolutu as a trade-in. I don't think he's like a long-term keeper. He could just be someone that you could use as a good stepping stone to maybe like a fallen gun, like a Lomax or a Val Holmes in the future. One thing that did concern me a little bit, so you can see on the screen here, I plugged into the price change calculator. I tried to guess some scores for Tuipolutu. So I said, let me give him 50 versus Melbourne. So let's say he gets his base and then maybe one attacking stat. Then he goes 70-70 versus Parramatta and the Titans, which I figured, maybe he gets a couple of extra attacking stats. Then he goes back to 50-60 for the remainder of that draw. I guess the concern is that because his biggest score is round 1, that will drop out of his 3-round rolling average straight away. And if he posts a low score this week, that does cap his cash generation just a little bit. So you can see on screen here, if he scored 50, he'd be making 79k. Then the week later, he'd make another 15k. So he'd be making 93,000 in total. Then he would actually start losing money. But at the same token, he'd be close to making 100k. And if he can jag anything better than 50 and 70 against Melbourne and Parramatta, then you are looking at someone who will make that kind of 100 to 120k of cash. And he could turn into just a good plug and play. Or you could actually just keep him for the remainder of this pretty decent run overall for the Dragons. So I think for people who are in RTS, if you're not looking at any major downgrades, I think that's not necessarily a no-brainer, but I do think it's probably your best bet at a similar price. You can literally just straight flick RTS to Tuipolutu and at least chance it. And that's my thing as well. Like, I'm happy to chance it with Tuipolutu. Yes, it may stumble and he may not be amazing like he was in the opening 2 rounds. But when you've got such a big negative break even, and if he does spike, like say 60, even 60 against Melbourne, and then if he can even get close to an 80-90 against Parramatta and the Titans, then you're looking at someone who will probably get up to 700k. Then at that point, you're thinking, I've banked 150k, I've banked some decent points, I'll just cash him in for any fallen gun. That's kind of how you need to be playing Supercoach, I guess, at the beginning of the season. So I do like Tuipolutu, and if you can't get to Gutho, I don't love cover picks, but you can tell that there's this left edge bias. So at least you're getting a piece of that pie if you get Tuipolutu, but you can't get Gutho. So I think it's actually a pretty good trade-in as well. Good point here as well from Owen. Maybe just more broadly about the round in general. It is projected to be fairly wet weather in Sydney for this round. So, scoring in general might be a little bit down. Most of the heaviest rain is supposed to happen on Friday and Saturday. Saturday in particular is supposed to have pretty heavy rain. So games on that day, including the Dragons one, might just see some lower scoring if you're trying to factor that into your thinking. Sunday though looks pretty good, partly cloudy, not much rain around. So someone actually asked in the chat, who am I thinking of captaining for this week? Tommy Turbo will be my captain, I think, for this week. If it's sunny at Brookvale against the Eels. I haven't really thought too much about that one. All right, let's talk a little bit about 5/8s. We haven't even spoken about Cleary yet. My God, actually, you know what? Let's talk about Cleary. Otherwise, people might say, "What the hell are you doing? Not talking about him yet? Where is he?" So, let's see. What are we looking at? We're like 48 minutes in the stream. All right, let's get through things a little bit better. Adam Quinn says lower scoring. Excuse me, Nico Hines with wet hair? Question mark. Yeah, look, Nico Hines with wet hair. His average. I mean, you'll have to reach out to Clem Cassidy on this one. She is the leading mascot for the Prince Nico wet hair party. But yeah, I'm sure that Hines averages at least 50 points extra when he's in the rain. But yeah, on halfbacks, good segue. Thank you, Adam, for that. So Cleary, 727k. I think he's the most traded out player. Look, I said my thoughts a little bit earlier in the stream about selling KP or Cleary. I would much prefer selling KP than I think I would Cleary. He's only going to be out for 1 week. Look, he's already lost money, so you can't do anything about that 84k that he's already lost. I've put in, hopefully you can read these, in the 2 tables below me. I've tried to put in some projected price changes for Cleary and also Adam Reynolds. And sorry, someone in the chat was also asked, what's the tool for price change calculator? I believe, let me just send you one in the chat. So this is from NRL SuperCoach Stats, which is literally like, as I always say, bloodline of this YouTube channel. They just do God's work basically for anyone doing SuperCoach Stats. So they've got a price change calculator. So what I did was for Cleary, obviously he's not changing in price this week, comes back to the Cowboys and then the Dolphins in round 5-6. So what I did for him, I just gave him 100 points against the Cowboys because I thought, look, he can easily do that. And then I gave him an 80 average, which is what he averaged last season. So the thing with Cleary is that if he goes out and scores pretty decent against the Cowboys, he's only going to lose probably another 68k. And then, so his price will bottom out at 660k. And then he'll start going back up in price. And we know that Cleary at any point can pull out a massive score and all of a sudden his price will just flip like a switch. So I'm not a massive fan of selling Cleary for that particular reason. Adam Reynolds is the guy I think a lot of people are looking at as that trade-in to try to make some extra money. So I tried to play the same. I tried to do similar with Adam Reynolds. Maybe I was being a little bit harsh on Reynolds in terms of his projected scoring. I gave him a 65 average, which, he's averaged 98 so far this year. So he's doing well above that. Even if you gave him, say, like a 70 average, let's stick to the 65 average. I've got him peaking at 687k in round 5 and making an extra, an extra 80k. So if you went Cleary to Reynolds, you free up 110k this week and you'd probably make another 140k in the process. Look, there's a lot of cash generation available. And if you believe that Reynolds will continue to score well, at least in the next 2 weeks, Dolphins and Tigers at home, I can kind of understand that, but I think I'm much less keen on it because I just feel less confident with Reynolds long term, and I feel more confident in Cleary coming back against the Cowboys and pulling a big score out. So that's personally why I'm not really that keen on the Cleary sell. Again, I always say the only situations I think I'm really on board with selling someone like Cleary, Ponga, if you can free up this money, and that's what lets you get Payne Haas, and that's your only best way to do it. Look, I can't sit here and say, don't do that because you shouldn't be getting Payne Haas. Like, I think Payne Haas is reaching that, just get him in. And this is probably the last week for Payne Haas as well. I think he's got a break even of like 3 or 4. So I understand on trade situations like that. Aside from that, though, if you've kind of able to get the likes of Tino, Papy, Gutho without having to sell Cleary, that would be my preferred approach. I'd actually probably go Cleary to Reynolds, though, before I would go Cleary to Hines. Like with Hines, I think the next, like he obviously had a great game against the Rabbitohs, but then the next 3, Bulldogs at home, Canberra away, and then Manly at home. The next 3 are a little bit difficult. Round 7, though, looks really good. You've got Knights, Tigers, Parramatta. So I think for me, Hines has looked really good. I think my strategy is going to ideally, though, be get my... I've got Tom Starling at hooker. Hopefully he makes more money up into round 6, round 7. And then I can hopefully cash him in to Nicho Hines in round 7 and swap Sanders Smith back up to backup hooker. That's probably going to be my play. I posted a trade situation earlier in the week where I was selling Connor Watson for Hines. Look, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. I think Connor Watson is a hold. But I'm very keen, I think, to hold Cleary. Probably happier to entertain that kind of fullback roulette, just where I think you've got way better replacements and more of replacements available compared to halfback. And I think it's just that Cleary had Cowboys and Dolphins after his 1 week off. So, yeah, personally, I'm not looking to entertain selling, I think, Cleary. Just going to run through things a little bit faster, just because I know there's some questions on 5/8 that I've also missed out on. So let's get on to that. So Fang Nato has asked, and I can see, Cuz, you're asking about VCs. Don't worry, we'll talk about captaincies and VCs after this. Don't worry, we'll get into that section. Where are the questions? So Fang Nato was asking, Aman, Galvin as a pod over Munster at 5'8", worried about Munster's injury and suspension worries. Look, Munster's injury, I don't think he's got any injury concerns. I think he's kind of overcome that groin issue he had all of last year and in the off season. Yes, look, Munster likes to niggle a bit, so maybe there's always that threat of suspension, but I think he is smart enough and wily enough, if that's the word, to know when to draw the line. So I wouldn't use that as rationale to not get Munster, if that makes sense. I think he's not, I wouldn't worry so much about a suspension risk and stuff with him. Galvin as a point of difference over Munster. Look, so I've got the numbers on screen here. So Galvin's actually got the best base power out of most of these 5'8s. Surprisingly, like Dylan Brown's work rate has really dropped off in the opening 3 rounds. His base power average is only 27. Munster's is 33 and Galvin is 42. Galvin is probably your safe option in that because of that as a result. And he doesn't have a bye until round 12. Overall, pretty decent run for the Tigers. Like, I feel like Galvin is always safe for 50s, 60s, and he can occasionally spike those kind of 80, 90 and the low 100 games. Munster, would I pick Munster over Galvin? I think I'd still pick Munster over Galvin. So I think, like, attacking wise, I trust Melbourne more than I do the Tigers, despite how good the Tigers are going. Last week, like in the opening round, Munster had 99 points, scored 61 against Penrith, which, look, it included 3 try assists, but they're all off kicks. As I said in the Sunday stream, if even 1 or 2 of them were like line break assists, you're adding an extra 16 points to a score. And then you're looking at, instead of 61, you're looking at 77. And I think if you're looking at Munster going 99-77, going into the Dragons, Manly, Warriors, Dolphins, etc., I think you'd probably almost think, you know what, it's Munster. So I like Galvin. He's probably 3rd in my listing of Munster, Campbell, and Galvin. But I would prefer, I think, to still go and get Munster. Slightly cheaper. Base is proving to be a little bit lower, but I just think he's going to more consistently hit 70s than I think maybe Galvin will. People might be asking Campbell or Munster. I think that's probably a pretty common topic for this week. I've also got AJ Brimson up on screen here as well. Adam Quinn was saying, AJ Brimson is doing my head in at 5'8". Please help me, Aman. I don't want to be poor in SuperCoach. It's all right, man. Look, hey, SuperCoach is just a game in the end. Don't worry. And look, luck happens and strikes at any point in time. You could be the best, but you could be the best SuperCoach and plan the most perfect trades. But if you're trading in a player who gets knocked out in opening rounds and you captain him and stuff, then there's not much you can do about it. So the game is just a lot about luck as well as skill. But yeah, look with Brimson very quickly. So he's 539k. He's got 105 break even. It's a slightly tough matchup against the Roosters away. Not overly difficult, but not ideal. Then he runs into Dolphins, Dragons, Canberra, Cowboys. Like the 4 games after that, I do really like. But with Brimson, I think, yes, I'd be happy to move on. 105 break even. He's probably going to lose a bit of money. Just hasn't shown enough, I think, so far. And I think he's at a price where like you just need to spend maybe 70k more and you get to a Munster. I think that's great. You can spend a little bit more to get to Galvin. Yeah, for me, Brimson to Munster would be a really good trade. I think if you can do that, I haven't seen enough out of Brimson, I think, to justify keeping him at this point in time. Love how Luai's not even up there, says Rick. Yeah, look, Luai's doing great things for the Tigers, but when it comes to SuperCoach, nothing. Which is strange because so many of us, myself included, we had him in a lot of preseason teams, but then we just didn't see him in the trials, so we just didn't, me anyway. Because I hadn't seen him in the trials, I just thought, I'm not going to risk it. Let's start with, I started with Munster, and Luai's coming in averaging 31. He's dropped 72k and he's got a break even of 121. So yeah, Luai, if you own Luai still, sell. I think you need to sell him before he just starts leaking you so much cash, and you might buy Luai at 350k later in the season potentially. So yeah, definitely Munster over Galvin, I think, for me. When it comes to Campbell versus Munster, there's a significant price difference between the two. 70k? I think, not 70k, sorry, 90k. There's 90k difference between the two. Campbell probably will be the highest, averaging 5'8" at the end of the season, just because he's goal kicking and he's commanding so much of the ball. Even for the next few games, apart from this Roosters game, he's got a very good run. But I think I'd still lean Munster just because he's got that 90k price saving on him. Ideally, you have both in your 5'8". I think your ideal halves setup would be Cleary, Hines, Campbell, Munster, just as it currently stands. I think that's what I'd be looking to get towards. But slightly leaning Munster, I think, over Campbell. Campbell's also got a 56 break even coming into this round. So, because I also looked at this, potentially raising enough money to get in Campbell this week from Metcalf. Because Metcalf, I don't have him up on the... Actually, I realised I don't have Metcalf up here. Metcalf, I think I'm going to give him at least one more week. He's got the Tigers, and then he's got the bye next week, and I'll reassess. Even if Campbell comes out and scores 100 points against the Chooks, his price is probably only going to go up to about 740k. He's not going to go massively out of reach. Yet if Metcalf stinks again and has a very high break even, then I could see myself going Metcalf to Campbell next week, potentially. If you're getting one of the two this week, I slightly prefer Munster. I do think, though, that Campbell probably has got a higher ceiling. More likely is going to be able to get those 110, 120 point scores, purely because he's got the goal kicking. And the Titans, the loss of Kinney might hurt their attack a little bit, but they're a team that can lose games like 26 to 30. But if Campbell's kicking, 4 or 5 goals a game, that's 20. He's actually a pretty good goal kicker, as I've noticed as well. You're getting an extra kind of 20 points a game there. So I think Campbell's got a higher ceiling. I think just right now when you're trying to manage your salary cap, I guess, in your SuperCoach team, I like Munster, just I guess for that slight discount. But look, if you've got the money and you can get Campbell in and lock him in, I think that's completely fine as well. So that's some of my thoughts, I guess, on 5'8". And also a little bit on Metcalf as well. Let's quickly just get on to... I've got a slide on Payne Haas, but do I really need to talk through it? Probably not. Just look at what the screen... Just look at the screen. Just look at the base power numbers. 83, 101, 105. Look at his break even, which I realize I don't have the screen. I don't have it on the screen. His break even is 4. Just get Payne Haas in, is what I'll say. I've also got a slide here on like base power beasts. I put this up on Instagram and Twitter as well, so I don't probably need to spend too much time on it today. But Payne Haas is topping it, 96.3 average base power. Terrell May 80.7, and then Tino like 71.5. So other downgrade options to watch out for is Thomas Cant next week, because he's got the Knights are on the bye this week. And also Trey Mooney and what his minutes look like for this round, because he actually killed it in terms of base stats. Toby Cashman might be a sneaky play in second row, but he's awkwardly priced at 483k. His base power average is 68. I think his minutes have been slightly inflated as well. So just quickly touching on him also. Someone's asking, would I prioritize selling Walsh or Hopgood? Hopgood actually rounds out this base power list. He's got a base power average of 60. I think Reece Walsh's break-even is higher. It's 149, I want to say. Hopgood's is 86. So Walsh is more likely going to lose money. Equally, Walsh probably will be more likely to have a big score in the next few rounds. I guess it really just depends on what you're trying to facilitate in terms of freeing up money and stuff. I mean, gun to my head, I'd actually rather keep Reece Walsh than Hopgood, purely because I think he's got that upside in the next few weeks that Hopgood doesn't have. But he is more likely going to be going down in price in the next, at least this round. All right, on to captaincy for this week. I think it feels pretty easy, if I can say that. But that's in my position. I'll go through maybe players that others don't have. So, for example, for me, I own Payne Haas and I own Tom Trbojevic. Payne Haas against the way that Payne Haas is going, like, if he just pumps out like 110, I might just take that as a loop and just lock in 220 points, because we've got the flex position to cover those really poor scores in our 17s. So Teddy against the Titans at home could be a very good pod choice if you are looking at fullbacks and maybe wanting to go a little bit different. Reece Walsh, I think if you're keeping Reece Walsh for this week, he's a great VC candidate. Dolphins have been the third worst at defending opposition fullbacks. But I think Payne Haas is going to be your safe bet against the Dolphins, just with the way that he's going. It's ridiculous. I do have Gutho and Papy in this list here. I think also with Payne Haas, before I quickly go on to those other two, if you don't own Tom Trbojevic, I think I would be very comfortable just straight captaining Payne Haas. I think he's just got that high of a floor right now. You can lock in almost 85 to 90 points from him. So I think if you don't own Turbo this week and aren't getting him, I'd probably honestly just captain Payne Haas at this rate. Other VC options could be Gutho or Papy. Obviously with Papy, just pending what happens with his health and if he actually will play this week. Hines is an okay captaincy shout, but I don't love it. I think it's that Manly game, Parramatta at home on Sunday, which Sunday is looking to be the day that has got the better weather. In Sydney, it doesn't look like it's going to be raining as much. So I think Turbo is a great captaincy option. I haven't got him on screen here, but if you don't own Turbo, but you have Garrick, obviously coming off a massive 157, you can easily captain Garrick as well coming into this week. If you have both Turbo and Garrick, I'd still prefer Turbo. I think he's just going to be more involved in general than maybe Garrick will be. So that's probably where I'd be leaning with captaincy. Again, to summarize, if you don't own Turbo or a Manly gun, I'd probably go just captain Payne Haas. If you got Garrick, you could go VC Haas, captain Garrick. I like Penrith players this week. Someone in the chat's actually just said Brian To'o straight captain this week against Ravalawa. Yeah, could be feasting there, but they play the first game of the round. I don't like normally captaining on the Thursday night game, so I'd probably just VC To'o in that situation. Dan, the South fan, says, come on, you guys, like the stream. This is gold content. Thank you. Yeah, give the stream a like if you are enjoying, guys. There's 260 of you watching, which is amazing. That's very, very, that's a very large audience. So very happy to see that. So thank you all so much. And yeah, hopefully you are enjoying it. So that's kind of it for that side of things. I'm just going to quickly bring up my team. Hopefully you can see that. All right, let me just zoom in a bit. So again, last week when it came to the trade section of the stream, I was a bit all over the shop. I'm not as all over the shop this week, although I haven't fully locked in trades. I'll just run through a couple of scenarios that I've been thinking about. So let me just, and also while I do that, I'll take another 5-10 minutes of questions as well at the end of the stream. So I've got a few outs in my team this week. Connor Watson is out, but I'll be holding him. Cleary is also out, but I think I'll be holding him. Sanders Smith will be my replacement at halfback. At least he has the Titans. So I'm probably going to that game on Friday as well. So I don't mind watching players live that I own in SuperCoach. So Sanders Smith will be in for me. I am currently still playing Nafahu White, but the bench doesn't look as good for him. But he's been very good for me the last couple of rounds in terms of a play. So I might just keep the faith with him for this week, potentially. And Tom Starling comes in for me at hooker. So I've got cover and halfback and hooker, which is good. VC Payne Haas, Corey Horsburgh, Terrell May. Nothing probably to say about them. Fortunately, I already have Tino as well, so I don't need to worry about getting him in, and I already own Munster. So a few guys who I think others may be trading in this week who I own already, which is good. So I've got Tuipolutu though. He's out for 8 weeks, so I think he'll be definitely a sell for me. So that's an obvious one. So the very first thought, which was very annoying because I couldn't actually get the money to work, was Tuipolutu to Tuivasa-Sheck to Tuipolutu, Iongi to Pappenhausen. I know ideally I'd keep Iongi, but this was when I was trying to play around with getting to 3 gun fullbacks. And then I could sell Kobe Hetherington, and I was going to sell him to Hamish Stewart via duels, but I was 5k short of that. So I can't do that. So I was like, okay, scratch that plan. Not an option. So other couple of trades that I was thinking about, I could do something like Tuivasa-Sheck. Instead of going to Tuipolutu, if I wanted to free up a lot of money, I could if I took the plunge on Jenkins a week early, I could do something like Tuivasa-Sheck to Jenkins, gives me heaps of money in the bank. That lets me do Iongi to maybe Pappenhausen or maybe Gutho. Let's just put in Papy for the time being. And then I could do Kobe Hetherington and I could get in like Matty Nicholson. So that would be a boost. I'm not 100% sure if I need to boost this week, but if I like the 3 guys who I'm bringing in, then I don't mind ripping a boost. That's fine with me. So this would leave me in a pretty good position if I did this particular set of moves, but it is taking that risk on Jenkins. No Dragons play, so I'm not getting in Gutho or Tuipolutu, but it lets me get to 3 gun fullbacks, so I don't have to worry then about trying to trade back to Ponga. So I think that puts me in a good position. My centers then would be Garrick. I'd keep Skelton as well for this week, given that he's been named. I'd play Jenkins against the Rabbitohs, and I'd play Nicholson instead of Nafahu White. So my reserves would be Terrell May. Actually, you know what I'd do? I'd probably not play Metcalf just because he's 2 rocks or diamonds. I'd actually probably play Nafahu White. So my reserves would be like Matty Nicholson, Garrick Skelton, and Terrell May, which looks pretty good for this week. And I'd be captaining Turbo. So those were some of my initial trade thoughts. So Kobe Hetherington's been a bit of a plotter, so I don't mind selling for Matty Nicholson, who I think will be a much better prospect kind of in the medium term. I still have a couple of issues, like Valmega from the Warriors is still sitting in my team, but he's not really affecting things at the moment, so I'm just going to sit with him there. If I did this set of trades, I'd be on 195k in the bank. Luke Metcalf has got a break even of 2, so ideally Metcalf can pull out a good score, or at least make a little bit more money. Like, for example, if I gave Metcalf 50 this week, I'm just going to quickly plug this into the SuperCoach Stats calculator. If he scored 50 this week, he'd make 36k. So then he'd be 190k. What I could do potentially next week is Metcalf out. I'd have about, I'd actually maybe be able to go get like a Galvin at 5'8", or instead what I could do is try to get Jaden Campbell and do one more downgrade next week, which I could do maybe with like a like what I could actually do instead of getting Jenkins in this week is I could get like Stafford Toa instead, and then if Jenkins does look the goods next week, then I could instead go someone like Jesse Arthurs if he's peaked in price, or maybe a Purdue or a Shibasaki. Cash in on one of them, get to a Jenkins, that would maybe free me enough money to go Metcalf to Jaden Campbell next week. That's something I've considered. So that's kind of what I'm currently looking at. It's a bit of a risk of, as I said, I don't need to maybe get Jenkins. Maybe instead I'd get like a Stafford Toa, but I don't love Stafford Toa. Like, he's okay, but he's 288k, so it's a bit of that kind of awkward price. But I like getting a Papy or Nicholson this week. If I didn't do Papy in for Iongi, so let me actually just cancel trade. Sorry, probably the last trade scenario I'll go through before I get to some questions. If I did do the KP out route, so let's say I went Gutherson if Papy's maybe in some doubt. So let's say I go Ponga to Gutho, Tuivasa-Sheck. I could go all in and get Tuipolutu. I mean, I've got plenty of cash in the bank, so I can even consider getting in a gun center wing, for example, like a Lomax even. I'd probably most likely just take the chance on Tuipolutu and try and make some money, or I could get like a Kale Iro, for example, who's been super solid. Let's say for the sake of argument, I get Tuipolutu. That's 276k in the bank. And then I can still do Hetherington to Matty Nicholson. That leaves me with 300k in the bank next week. So in that situation, then what I'd probably do next round is I wouldn't straight use all that money and go Metcalf to Campbell. Or if I did, I just need to be thinking of a way to make sure that I can get Iongi back to Ponga. That would be something I just have to work through next week. But it gets me good trade targets of 2 guys with low break-evens, should make a lot of coin, good draw past Melbourne, and Matty Nicholson. And it gets rid of Tuivasa-Sheck, who's an issue. Kobe Hetherington's a bit of a plotter. KP, it's just a bit of fullback roulette. So that's currently where my trade plans are at. So I think I'm 65% to boost, 35% to not boost. That's probably where my head's at the moment. All right, guys, let's take your questions for about 5 minutes. So Finn, you're saying I could do Dimitri Valmoga to Nicholson with this trade scenario. The only thing I'm concerned about is that if I use all that money to bring Valmoga up to Matty Nicholson, that's like 120k. That's money that I might want to keep in reserve if I did this kind of situation, but I need to try to get back to Ponga, if I need to get onto a Nico Hines in the future as well. Whereas Hetherington, I looked into it, like Hetherington's probably going to score me between 35 to 40 each week. He's probably not going to be making that much money for me. Valmoga is not really that much of an issue for me. If he punches out 20 a week on my bench, yes, he's not the best AE auto emergency, but we've got so many cheapie centers still, like Valmoga. We've got Purdue, Robert Toya, Arthur, Shibasaki. These guys aren't the most reliable, consistent center wings. They can easily put out 20 on any given week. So for the time being, Valmoga is not really hurting me. Not keen on Hines. I'm definitely keen on Nico Hines. But the thing is that my best route to Nico Hines is by selling Sanders Smith, Connor Watson, or Tom Starling via duels. Unless I went Iongi to Hines, I guess, in the flex. But Sanders Smith's got a negative break-even. Tom Starling's got a negative break-even. I think Connor Watson's actually a good hold. So that's probably why my best route isn't yet to Hines. As I said earlier, I think Tom Starling, he's got that negative 20 break-even. If I can just hold him until at least round 7 and he peaks in price, Hines' draw really opens up at that point. Maybe that's when I do Starling to Nico Hines. Hey man, why do you put Garrick and Skelton on the reserves? I've seen heaps of people do this. Okay, so maybe for any more newer Supercoach players. So the best way to set up your team is players who are playing later in the round, keep them on your bench ideally if you can. Like obviously if you're not wanting to play like a Robert Toya or a Shibasaki, then don't play them. But this week Toya's got the Titans, Shibasaki's got Dolphins. I want to play all of them. And I've obviously lost some troops on the bye, and then also Cleary and Watson. So by keeping the flexibility of Garrick and Skelton on the reserves, what it means is that if they're in your starting team, but they play later in the round, but let's say you've got guys who've played early in the round in your reserves and they already lock out. You can't then take your reserve off of that player just in case there's some kind of last minute change in those later rounds. Like TLDR basically just makes your team more flexible. Like for example, Jarrell Skelton, maybe he's under a bit of an injury cloud and he may be a late dropout. Now, by keeping him at the end in my reserves, in a different trade, in a different week, let's say if I was playing Connor Watson and Starling was there as a non-playing reserve, I can just take that reserve off of Skelton and I can put it on to maybe someone else playing at the end of the round. So general practice is you play your guys in your starting team that you're playing early in the round. That's also why I've got Metcalf on the bench versus Munster. And play the guys who are playing at the end of the week on your reserves. The exceptions are guys like, say, Turbo, who, he plays in the second last game of the round, but I want to captain him. Therefore, I need to put him in my starting team and put the captain on him. So hopefully that made sense. Thoughts on this, says Isaac. Ponga, RTS, and Sione Finau, I'm guessing. For Gutherson, Garrick, and Jenkins, I can make it work with $100. $100 or 100K? Yeah, I like those. Like Finau and RTS, you can get rid of, and I guess Pong is your cash cow for that. So don't hate that. Is Nicholson a must this week? Definitely not a must, but he's a good trading option. He should make at least 100K, and he's got decent scoring about him. Wish Haas was 12K lower. I could have went him to Gilbert straight away. Yeah, unfortunately, I think updates may have got you there. If he was on 132, then you might have been lucky there. Finn says, need the cap for Iongi to a gun. Yep. So that's the reason why I'm not maybe looking at doing Dimitri out all the way up to Nicholson. Sorry for the repeated question, Aman. No problem. Is Sarko to Papy or Goz to Tino? Be my Xanax and help me sleep tonight. I think, look, with this potential doubt around Pappenhausen, I think Goz to Tino. Like, Asako is not fantastic, but at least he's decent. Goz is, I'm going to say it, is pretty much useless for you now. If you can go Goz to Tino, that's such a way better upgrade than Asako to Papy. I think I'd be just locking in that particular move. Thoughts on Lomax, Howarth, and Alamotti in for Cobbo, Tuivasa-Sheck, and Stone Street? Yes, Stone Street's a frustrating one, But just, I guess, most Sharks outside backs, they're just going to fluctuate with which of them scores big on any given week. Like, he's gone 40, 112, and then 18. Lomax I like. I think he's a gun. You can pretty much lock him in. Howarth has been pretty good. Alamotti should be goal kicking this week, so I also don't hate that. I think Cobbo can go. Stone Street, it can probably go. And Tuivasa-Sheck has to go. So I think that's pretty good. Thomas Tupo, welcome to being a member. Thank you so much, Thomas. I appreciate that massively. Guys, there's no massive major perks of being a member apart from your support, which I very much appreciate. But what I have started doing is, so obviously on Patreon, which I have now, I post my kind of final team, final sit-v starts, captaincy decisions, all that good stuff. I do post that though also for YouTube members. So if you want to become a member for that reason as well, that's also another way that you can get access to that kind of final team. I generally make community posts before the end of Thursday. Patreon is where I do most of my updates though mid-round as well. Like I put out like kind of mid-round thoughts, early trade thoughts and things like that. So do join there as well if you're interested in that. Am I worried about Sanders Smith in my 17 this week? Yeah, a little bit. But look, he's goal kicking and it's the Titans who don't have Keanu Kinney this week. So I think, look, even if you can, I'll take 50 from Sanders Smith, put it that way. Is Tuivasa-Sheck to Arthur's a decent move or too late? It's not great, but I don't think it's too late. Negative 14 break even, still has 3 very good games at Suncorp coming up. You're still making 100k off that move, downgrading. Yeah, I don't think it's too late. Not ideal, but it's not too late. I'm on $20 to Captain Valmoga. Nah, not even worth $20. I've had a good start to the season. I want to keep the momentum going. If Papy ends up healthy, Walsh to Papy or Gutho. I think discussed this in quite a lot of detail earlier, but if Papy's healthy, I think I'm leaning Papy slightly more than Gutho. I'll probably do 2 more questions and then I'll wrap things up because my voice is starting to hurt a bit. Pakes, Hopgood, Ponga to Tino, Papy and Hines. Yeah, I mean, look, to be fair, those three trade-ins are juicy. Yeah, Mildura, I think I'd probably do those trades, to be honest. Who's the trade to Tuipolutu, Lucas or Tuivasa-Sheck? Interesting one, because both of them are out for a fair few weeks. I'd actually trade Tuivasa-Sheck. So Tuivasa-Sheck looks to be 8 weeks. Lucas was 6 weeks, so that's one. The other thing, though, is that I think keeping Dylan Lucas in your team, if you can afford to hold him, then his dual status is very handy, like second row forward, center wing. And I didn't really speak about it much this stream as well, but Beau Fermor, for example, he's got a base power average of 57. I think he's second row forward, center wing eligible. He's actually a pretty good option for that dual reason as well. Second row forward, center wing is very good. Flarbets literally says Fermor goodbye. Yeah, I think Fermor is actually a pretty decent purchase. Look, I could consider Fermor as well if I don't in the end decide to go Tuipolutu. Emily here is asking, do I get Tuipolutu or Fermor in for Tuivasa-Sheck? I mean, they're very different. One's a lower base, higher upside guy. Fermor's kind of a good base, solid guy. I think I'd chance it with Tuipolutu. He's just got that massive negative break even, and he just could make plenty of money. Trade in Wishart. I don't think I'd be trading in Wishart. It looks like Hughes is going to be only out for 2 weeks, so I think it's very short term with Wishart. Good for draft maybe, but probably not for classic. Just want to say thank you for an awesome stream, Aman. I could listen to you all day. Thanks, mate. Thank you, Adam. That's very, very kind. I think on that note, I'm probably going to wrap up the stream there, guys. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Do please give it a like on the way out. If you did, it really does help me out massively. Go check out my Patreon as well if you want to see my kind of final team and stuff. Otherwise, majority of the content on the stats, break-evens, and all that kind of stuff generally will still be on all the free platforms on Instagram and Twitter. So do follow me there as well. But thanks everyone for tuning in. It was a great stream. And thanks all for tuning in. Most likely catch you again on Sunday for the wrap-up stream. Until then, good luck for the rest of the week and cheers and have a good night.